Welcome to our discussion, Sustainable Cities of 2050. 2050 is, it looks like it's it's far from now. And there's basically only two ways of figuring out how our cities will be sustainable in the next 30 years. One is actually going to a woman with a crystal ball and then trying to ask her to tell the future. And the second one is actually coming to this discussion. So, welcome. And our discussion actually today has a brilliant panel. And next to me on the left, it's well-known urban designer, Dalia Bardauskienė. She's a current advisor to the mayor for the matters of spatial planning and then has enormous amount of experience throughout all the fields of urbanism. Next is Helena Bjarnegård, and she's a Swedish national architect who was previously employed in a planning and landscaping department of city of Gothenburg, and she's also appointed by the government of Sweden as a chair for the Council of Sustainable Cities of Sweden. Next, it's Morten Nordskag. And he's a special advisor for the International Climate Cooperation of the City of Oslo, and formerly deputy director at the Norwegian Ministry of Environment. And last but not least, it's Algimantas Varbučinskas, who is an architect and with a particular interest in co-housing, more like co-built housing. And as an introduction, I have a really short story. Before preparing for this panel, I had a very nice talk with Morten, and I was kind of trying to figure out, okay, so where do we start? 30 years from now, yeah? 30 years from now, it looks like a really, really distant future. But then Morten told me about the Oslo initiative, Oslo kind of package initiative for congestion charging. You know what congestion charge is? It's like paying for entering the city by car. And the first initiatives, actually the package was formulated in 1988. Remember 1988? I almost don't. Yeah, I was 4 years old, and now 30 years from now on, the package started in they started collecting charges in 1990, and it's exactly 30 years from now. So 1990 is also a year of our independence. So the question is very, very simple. If we take a Norwegian example for the city of Oslo, and then what was the climate for innovation in order to come up with the decisions like that. Now we know the result, the impact of a vision of the city for the future, and what needs to be done in the next 30 years in order to come to the present situation. So now my question is, for the first part of discussion is, could you share your vision of and a bit reflect of what happened in the last 30 years and what will be the next 30 years for the development of your hometown? Please.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. I'm very excited about the topic that we will discuss. In 1990, there was a lot of protests in Oslo about the introduction of the congestion charge. You would see mass mobilization in the streets, everyone furious about, restricting access, restricting freedom of movement. But after a while, it's like taxes. It goes away. It's painful in the beginning, but then you get used to it. And gradually, people saw that the city became upgraded. So with that income, we managed to move all traffic underneath the city in tunnels. And suddenly, the air quality situation in our city was tremendously improved. And there was less, of course, cars on the streets, more space for families and children, more space for bicyclists. That has probably paved the way for quite a strong acceptance for what we are now working on as a project, creating Oslo to become the first capital of the world as a zero-emission city. We will achieve that in 2030. It's a lot of work.
It's very soon.
It's 11 years, so a lot of work needs to go into that. But we are heading in the right direction. Our measurements lately inform us that 2 years ago, the emissions went down by 8%. Last year, they went down by 9%. So we're actually ahead of the curve, which is a strong motivation for us in continuing that policy. The vision document that was produced at City Hall just June this year is Oslo Sustainable City 2040, not 2050. It's an inclusive green city with continued economic growth. It takes our goal and objective as a zero-emitting city in 2030 as the point of departure. And by that, all investments need to be focused around public transport, not just electrification on personal cars, but how to move people from A to B.
Okay, let's imagine you did it. Oslo is completely carbon-free 2040. What do you do next 10 years?
The next 10 years, it's probably not all social issues would be solved, right? Yeah. So it's a capital. We have inequalities in our capital as in any major city. And there's an area where we definitely need to step up our efforts. It's closely related to social housing, improvements in areas for low-income families. Those areas tend to be neglected economically, so they would be on par with what you see in also areas where you have high-income families in the city, and a city which is inclusive and no one left behind, and where this transformation has been done in a way that it's been just and fair, and no one has felt that they didn't have a chance to say what were their needs and their hopes and aspirations for what the city would look like.
And as a representative for City of Vilnius, what do you think, like, is there anything that sounds very familiar with kind of, once we're talking about the traffic in Lithuania, it's always kind of considered more as a right, yeah? What are kind of the problems that we experience currently related to the, let's say, mobility issues, and what is the vision for the City of Vilnius in next, let's say, 30 years?
Thank you very much for inviting to this discussion. And first of all, Martinez, I would like to say that when we started to speak about 1990, we are not in the same position. Yeah, maybe many of you know that in 1990 we have this singing revolution. And together with this democratic movement, we inherited also huge problems. And not only cars. I understand that you, during 30 years, you were working with the cars, how to make your environment more cleaner, more comfortable, more humanistic. We have now this, let's say, comfort. We inherited huge problems. First of all, we have huge Soviet multi-story housing areas, which is a huge problem, where, for example, in Vilnius and in other big cities lives about 60% of citizens. So it's a huge problem, and only, I would say, only 5 or 7 years now we have ideas how to deal with this. And also we inherited very narrow streets which were not prepared for the cars. Because of the dependence, every citizen was very happy to have a car. It was not a matter. It's new, or I have a car. Later on they will have 2 cars. And what's happened finally that, for example, when the people became richer, they started to buy plots outside of the city because the cars allowed them go to from the cities. So I would say that we have a lot of problems, and for those solving those huge problems, we made 3 master plans, let's say 3 visions. And the current master plans we are going to approve this year, Vilnius City Vision towards 2030. Really, we also see our city very human, which is competing for the citizens, but with a fresh area, with open spaces, with public goods, affordable housing, because it's a very big problem, affordable housing, as our society in Lithuania is decreasing. So it's a problem, not a problem, it's a task, how to keep people in cities, how to keep them in Lithuania. So we have this strategy we're discussing in new master plan, as well as a public transport is a huge strategy, and we approved the strategy for the mobility. And the cars, unfortunately, if there are Lithuanians or Vilnius citizens, they should know that our strategy is take cars from the center, from Old Town, from the center, from another, and of course we will use financials instruments
kind of
to take.
Carrot and a stick instruments.
Of course. So I can talk a lot, but let's have a dialogue.
I see, Elena, that you're nodding to some things with some kind of almost like mother-like smile and understanding. So as a member of a board for Sustainable Cities of Sweden, I see that there's something that you see that you have in common, let's say, and then that something that is very similar, kind of heard many times, isn't it?
Yeah, we all have the same challenges because, of course, they're global, and we can look at the global goals, and we will get convinced of that. The challenge that we also have, expect from all the economical issues, the ecological issues, the social issues, and all of the, the 17 goals that points out all the different areas, is to combine the areas and really see how we can use city development and architecture as a tool to reach all of those goals, and how we can have more than one thought in our head at the same time, that we need to both think of affordable housing and financial systems and architectures and climate and resources at the same time. That's really what sustainability is all about, not to take one thing at a time, but to see it in a holistic way and find the solutions that will be solutions for all of those things in somehow. And
then you also mentioned in the article that was printed like a week ago about architecture as a tool of how to reach sustainability. Can you give specific examples of what kind of methods or what kind of decisions?
I can really start from the beginning and just tell you, everybody, that the Swedish government, they have a policy that is called Policy for a Designed Living Environment. And it's all about architecture as a tool. And architecture in this way is city planning, building of houses, landscapes, interiors, every detail. So it's a very, very wide description of architecture. And really use whatever you build in the city scale or in the house scale as a tool for sustainable development. And for example, I could say that we can take the bicycle example, as you said, that if you're going to take your bicycle, you need to, first of all, be able to take your bicycle. There should be a possibility to bike in your city. And the thing that everybody talks about right now is it should be simple to take your bicycle. You straight from point A to point B, a bicycle lane, bicycle rooms in your buildings and so on. But I also think when you see at this policy for the designed living environment, that it should be very nice to take your bicycle, that people really would like to take the bicycle because it's so nice to take your bicycle instead of your car when you go through the city. Maybe you go through a nice park or something. And that's where the design comes in, and looking at it from the people's perspective, and thinking if you would like to do that, how does that environment, how does that look? And it should also be possible, be easy, but also be nice. And that's where the design comes into it.
Design and a designer, obviously. Algimantas, I was wondering, like, in this discussion about living environments, what do you think designers can actually do to make themselves a little bit heard more? What are these kind of main challenges, let's say, in the profession? And is Lithuanian, let's say, government as inclusive as Swedish one? Once we're talking about the role of a designer in this kind of making sure that everything is not only functional but also has some sort of aesthetic value.
Well, I cannot really compare inclusiveness of Swedish government and Lithuanian one because I didn't work in Sweden, so I don't know. I cannot compare. Talking about like what we can do as a designer, I think we can more respond to the problems, because in the previous decade, what I saw in my industry, what architects were doing, they were building sculptures for themselves, like to be famous and to build a fancy glass facade, but actually not solving the city problems. So I think to make ourselves more relevant, we should actually respond to the problems that we have. And that was kind of not embedded in our school. That's the first problem, and of course then it goes to the real world. And I forgot the second.
Yeah, and let's say, like, if we start from there, from your living environment, there's always some sort of twofold vision for the city of the future. One is like from Batman, like Gotham City, some kind of a dystopian environment where everything is bad, everyone is kind of a criminal, and then you need and full of villains. But I'm pretty sure that with the current generation, let's say, of designers and planners, it's not going to happen. What would be your vision for our local urban environments? What would you love to see in our cities?
I would actually like to see in the next few decades that citizens would actually have a right to their own city, because what we have now, we kind of, I
but
see
in
that
a kind of Lefebvrean way, or more.
Let's say Lefebvrean. But what I saw in the past decade, that after we got our independence, we saw the free market as a panacea for everything. Okay, let's give everything to the free market, and it's gonna solve itself. No, it didn't. Now, in the 30 years of independence, we have increasing segregation levels. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, we have, especially in Vilnius, a really deep problem is suburbanization. And talking about the suburbanization and like the sustainable modes of traffic, we often forget the causes of that, and we often portray the suburbanization as a problem in itself, as a cause of the problem. Actually, it is a symptom, and it is a symptom that people cannot afford to live in a city. I have friends here sitting in this here in the auditorium, and they know all these problems about the city, about the mobility, and about sustainability, but it's a simple question. I cannot afford to live in a city, so that's why I'm buying the plot where I can afford. And that's the answer why we have suburbanization, because mm-hmm. people cannot afford to live in a city.
So basically, to summarize, is that we completely left the right, let's say, to develop housing to the private sector, and then now you're trying to kind of conclude that this method failed, and then therefore a state needs to put in some kind of measures or a foot in between the door, and also kind of contribute in also in a housing development.
I would say yes, but it shouldn't be left only for the state. I think it's a matter of cooperation, because we know what happened with the social housing where only the state was providing. It became a ghetto. So I'm certainly not offering this. But there are nice ways of cooperation, how to deal with this.
And what is, let's say, what are the major ingredients for the cooperation in the housing sector? What would you need in order to actually get it started?
I would say, like, the main philosophy should be eliminate the profit and eliminate the fact that housing became an object of speculation. We need to eliminate that element and to give more rights for the end user.
Okay, that's super interesting. And how does say Norwegian government deals with this problematics of, let's say, segregation, that certain areas become a little bit less affordable, and how does the city also tackle these mobility issues?
If I can return to that, because I just wanted to make a point on what Dalias and Helena said around design and public space. And I think working in the climate sector, we're trying to find measures on how to reduce emissions. I think designers and architects working very closely with those who design policies to reduce emissions will find each other, because what we are looking for is to reduce traffic and incentivize other mobility needs. And I think the perception and the experience of the citizens are very crucial in order to change that behavior. So if they feel that they enjoy their bicycle ride in the morning, they would rather opt for that solution than taking the car. If they are switching to public transport and it's affordable, reliable, but it's also kind of a cool experience to take public transport, they would also opt for that. So I think that's a very valid point.
Once you say it, it sounds very easy.
It isn't easy. It's very it's a complex situation, because cities have been, at least in Oslo and many other Norwegian cities, and I guess also in Europe, they've been built on the premises or the basis of the car. Freedom of movement in the 1950s, imported from the US. And you have a lot of big streets allowed for traffic to run through city centers. It's not built for people. It's built for cars and for commercial life to thrive, which is important and which we should still have policies to make sure that we have economic growth in our cities. But today there are so many options, technology, modalities, the way logistics works, or organizational forms. You could create mobility hubs. You could have trucks delivering goods just on the outside, and then you could deliver those goods with zero-emission cars or with cargo bikes or whatever, and then you would give back the public space in your city to the citizens.
Is it part of this Oslo zero-emission package, the initiatives that you're saying?
This is a central part of our climate strategy, and it's a central part of the municipal master plan towards 2040, to give back public space to the citizens of the city, and on the expense, definitely private car use, but to more and more also commercial traffic.
Helena, please.
I agree with you that it's very, very hard. It's very tricky. It's not easy at all. And you're just 2050 as the year somewhere in the future. Can the society be very much different then? And I was thinking, maybe not. Because the city structures that we will see in 2050 is the structures that we see today. Because most of the cities that we see in 2050 are the cities that are already built. So that's why it is so hard. How do we change our way of living in the cities that we already have? And how can we be so careful with all the things that we add to the city and how we add it? Where do we have the equilibrium between new buildings and parks, and how dense can a city be? And so we have all those issues that we deal with right now that really address all those challenges that we have.
So what you're saying is that the main challenges, let's say in the next 30 years, is not actually how do we build new, it's about how do we transform the existing, I guess.
Exactly, because tearing down existing buildings and structures is the worst thing we can do if you look at sustainability. Using the things we have in new ways, transforming them, that's the thing that we need to look into. And sometimes we even have regulations and laws that makes this impossible. So we need to look at knowledge, new ideas, as you have. We need to look at the laws, the regulation in each country, and even maybe on the EU level sometimes, to reach those challenges in different ways. And it's very, very hard, but we need to do it, because this is a sense of urgency here.
Well, yeah, the most sustainable thing to do with the building is actually not to do anything at all, sometimes just to reuse it. And this is once we're talking about existing, it's not only about physical environment, true? It's also about the civic economy, and it's also about local community. And now everyone knows City of Vilnius, everyone knows all the kind of hot topics about the transformation of public spaces, about transformation of existing, let's say, nostalgic relationships. And I think that Vilnius currently is undergoing this enormous amount of, let's say, mental shift and also a physical shift with all the good initiatives. And I was wondering, Dalia, as a let's say pioneer and a champion of community involvement, let's say from like already, I don't know, since I know you, but is there something that you regret, or is there something that there's some kind of lessons that you learned or you see it as some kind of natural process that we have to pass in a city?
I was listening carefully your experience, and I agree absolutely that the city is not about infrastructure or only about infrastructure or buildings or traffic. It's about citizens, and it's about positive emotions. And even that we passed those 30 years really very hard working, we have crisis. We have also trust and mistrust, but still our citizens are optimistic. But it doesn't mean that we don't need to work and to show that government, that city government is thinking about them. And now we're working or producing a new master plan. And master planning is a good tool to have a consensus. Because what is sustainable development? It's not indicators. It would be very easy. It's public involvement. It's consensus. It's vision. It's common vision. If the people will trust state or municipal government, and if the policy or master plan will reflect towards their issues, to the problem, they will trust. And what we have done in master plan, I don't want to talk about the regulations, maybe we'll later on, because I'm a little bit angry on what's going on in this field. But I will say about our responsibilities, urban planners and city managers. For example, what we put in these master plans, few very simple but very clear mechanisms. First of all, we say this is urban land and this is never would be urbanized. It would be left for the greenery, for the recreations, because we need to have a healthy environment. Vilnius needs to be green. Another thing what we have done, we look to this very poor Soviet residential areas, and we discovered areas and we reserve them especially for the public space. So our citizens would be calm, should be calm, because nobody will grab this land. Because after the independence, it was, say, wild privatizations, and a lot of public goods was just stolen, let's say. And people not always trust us. So our, as urban planners, role was to tell people, now nobody will take these public spaces for yourself. Also, what we have done, we put big attention to the bicycles and to the pedestrians, because last years was put to big attention to the cars, and now we need to reduce them. But it is impossible to say we don't need to have a car. It's impossible. People should see that we are working on the bicycle roads, that we are improving pedestrians, and that we are making squares and parks. Let's say even 70. See, for such a Vilnius with such a small budget, with a very small public budget, I don't want to tell this number, but I know your budgets are really very, very amazing. But even with this budget, we are going to improve 70 new public squares. And some of them are really...
70.
70.
Oh, wow.
Yes. 70. It's a plan, and now it's about 25 under. So it's amazing number, and it's not in the central part, because all governments like Old Town or central part. But what is good that we put attention to the neighborhoods in the outskirts of the city, because as far as I remember, all politicians, when they were coming to the government, they would think, oh, we will work for the outskirts because we know that the main all people live in there. But then nothing was done, and now it is. So what I wanted to say, I don't want to promote what we have done a good job, but it's also I'm pride, and all urban planners should be proud of the job what they are doing, but also they should be. Nothing will happen during one night, so they should be not so.
Yes, but
so fast.
Yes, and then as an urban planner myself, I also kind of at the same time I know that even though I'm doing something that I believe in, usually you cannot just make everyone happy. And Martin, you were previously talking about the stakeholder involvement to make in the creation of these sustainable policies. How does it work? And what are the stakeholders? What are the, let's say, their involvement in the methods? Do they have a role? Are there formal institutions and so on?
I would say that that's probably as important, the involvement of your citizens and stakeholders in your city, as the document itself. Because without it, you don't create ownership to the issue, and you lose out on the political or social support that the city administration and in Oslo, the city government needs to carry out its policies and measures to achieve those politically agreed goals. So for the municipal master plan for 2040, we did something we hadn't done before. We had a series of town hall meetings in all districts throughout the city, aggressive advertisement and information campaigns in the city that this is now happening. We invite everyone to contribute to the vision document. We sent an SMS to every citizen above the age of 16 that this document is now being produced. Look out for this website where you can find information. And we did the same with the climate strategy, because the climate strategy is part of that vision document for 2040. But it's much more detailed, and it will probably, the measures that we propose will have an impact in each citizen's life. So we did the same with them and all stakeholders for a period of 4 months. And we have institutionalized an annual polling in the city where we ask the citizens whether they support the goals of the city going forward in that direction and the measures that we propose and implement. And the feedback we get is astonishingly positive. It's 7 out of 10 supports the climate goal to go to a zero-emitting city in 11 years, knowing that this will restrict your car use, knowing that this will restrict your mobility freedom. And 6 out of 10 think that these very ambitious goals, which are in line with the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals, 6 out of 10.
I was wondering who's the 4?
Yeah, who's the 4? Of those, they think that doing all this will make Oslo a much better city for the future to live in. So I think that's a result of that early involvement, and a big help for us when we implement also the unpopular measures that we sometimes need to implement.
Okay, Elena, you wanted to add
Yeah,
something?
and that is so well done. I think almost an applause for this. And I think the things that you have done so well is, the stakeholder dialogue is not that hard. Because when you have stakeholders, often there are people living close by, and you gather them, you talk to them, and you can have dialogues and ask them in several different ways. But the citizen dialogue, when you should, ask all the citizens in Oslo, for example, how are you going to do with the public realms in the middle of the town that belongs to everybody, not just the ones living next door? That's very tricky. And the thing that a lot of cities have been doing right now is, to make test arenas, to build, to place-making projects, to really build something that is just going to be there for some months or a year, and try really geographically on the spot. New York did it in times, and Denmark has done it in Copenhagen, and you have done it in Oslo, transforming squares in the middle of the town to something else just for some months, and see how do people use them. That's very good. And the things that you have done well, and when we look at a lot of cities, when the citizen dialogue really succeeded, is when you succeeded in explaining why are we doing this change? Why are we and creating a sense of urgency that we need to do a change. So I think that's what you did very well when I see it from abroad.
From the other side.
I would like to reflect on what you have said on public involvement, on stakeholders' involvement. We were learning about this issue. And when we were doing first plan, we're now working on the third. When we were doing first plan, we put attention and we put our knowledge and ideas what we get from Scandinavian countries, because we were lucky that just after independence we got quite big know-how from Scandinavian countries, so we were trying to do that. And I remember when we were doing first master plan, it was 240 applications. And when we were doing meetings, not so many people were coming, because there still existed this maestro urban planner, which is very arrogant, intellectual arrogancy, and they were not too much trusting what we are doing. When we were doing next plan, it was much better. The next plan was till 2015. So it was much better. So about 700 applications we got. Also we have meetings and we have discussions. Unfortunately, not so much about public realm. It's mostly people were thinking about their own problems. So we understand that we need in future to work much more with this issue. And now we're working with the third master plan. And really, it is very open and very big input from public we got. very big. Even that about 1,200 applications we get with the different proposals. Of course, many of them are about private things, but also is how to improve our public spaces. So I see that it's very important to involve citizens, and we were using different forms of that. But as Vilnius is a city, so it works very well that we put all master plan and new solutions and in one screen. Everybody could see, sitting at home, being everywhere, just to see what's going on. So I think it is talking about master planning. It is a huge process, and it is a very important process for the citizens. Sometimes they are saying, what I can do with my parcel? But it is impossible to answer. They need to know bigger picture. And so master planning is exactly one of the main documents what city has, because their people, and if can find themselves and can feel calm and know the future. And today we have a really big real estate developments, and without master planning it would be impossible to do any construction in the city. But we are not talking about laws and regulations. In this field I see that our regulations and laws are a little bit outdated. Because
but don't you agree that I was kind of thinking, like, can you make a perfect law? I don't think so. I think it's not really about the rules or regulations that you something forbid, and then there are some ingredients that are not connected to this legislative structure, laws, and so on. It's about like society, how we live in, how they're educated. Do they get why certain decisions need to be made? And then what are other prerequisites in order to actually reach our, let's say, goals that we have for 2050? What do you think?
I would like also at the same time add to the public space that we are trying to like renew. At the same time, sometimes we're struggling to facilitate it. We spend a lot of money to make a nice furniture and stuff, but then it stays empty. And I think what we are often forget, especially in Vilnius, where we have such a huge creative capital, that there is actually people waiting, like, just to be offered for opportunity for a space to create and give something for the city. And I think city sometimes just loses this opportunity, not trading with these people. Okay, take the space, and what do you have to offer for the city? Here the space, what you can give for us, and you will get this. And I think this can be a really powerful answer when we are struggling to facilitate that public space, and especially when we are talking about the mass housing areas, because it's a huge challenge how to do that.
I agree absolutely with you. I agree absolutely. But for such a movement, it needs to be a critical. Yeah, it would be. We need to have a critical mass. And now I see young generation, young people. They are ready to do that. Especially those urban planners who came from abroad. They really are ready to facilitate the process. But there are also good experiences in our city. I do not know, maybe you was involved in this. It was about the creating public spaces, where those public spaces were created from the scratch. It was it was competition. We hired architects to work with the communities and to come up with the solutions. Another, we have a very interesting project, so-called Create Vilnius. It's for the artists. And we have a small money comparatively, but it's amazing. A lot of good things are coming because it is competition and the ideas are competing. So I see you are right that day by day we need more and more involved citizens, and not to keep everything in the city administration and city bureaucracy hands.
One thing
I would like to add on that one aspect. I do not agree on one thing, that we need a critical mass on that. Actually, we just need an interested group. One group is enough to facilitate some kind of space. It's just like a group of people, like in a technarium or in Užupis or in I don't know, in Loftus, anywhere. Like you don't need the entire city to agree on that. You just need one interested group of people, and the other.
Depends on scale.
Yeah.
Okay, then we go to a common problem with the best. Let's say you could have the best laws, yeah. You could have the best vision on paper, yeah. You can have a very incredibly well working pilot project, but some initiatives fail to scale up. Once you try to scale well initiative or let's say export it to the other country, what are, let's say, are the measures? How can you export some successful practices that they still work in a little bit different context?
I can see that we, a lot of times, I've been in a lot of panels where the word courage is used a lot. And I think it's a very good word, actually, because I often see exactly what you say, that we have very good visions, we have very good goals. We're talking, when we are making our strategic plans, that we are going to make a completely other city and so on. And sometimes we fail, but sometimes we also succeed. And I came from Malmö now, a town in southern Sweden. And we can really see that they have succeeded in many ways, also to involve the citizens, invite artists, providing space, public space for young people too, and making great architecture and great city planning in the recent years. And what did they do? And I think it's all about courage. It's about courage to, grab that vision, grab that goal, and not letting go of it, even when the wind blows hard in the end of the project and the really tricky questions come to the project, and you need to do strategic with choices. Just stick to the vision and the quality.
Does democracy help?
Yeah, it does really, because it's the politicians that need to help us with this. Yeah. And I met the politicians that are chosen by the people in Malmö yesterday, and they said this. And they also said that we need to be open to the world, and that's why I'm so happy that we're here from different countries, and we face the same challenges, we learn from each other. In Malmö, they said we want to learn from the best projects in the world and do even better here in Malmö. And I think that really they have done so, and it's amazing. And it's about courage. It's about courage and not letting go of the vision. And also the thing that you said before, I think I wrote it down, that the city government need to show that they care about the citizens. Yeah.
And it's also somehow like I have a feeling that we all have a very bright future, and it's just gonna, like, it's 100% that's going to happen. But
it's very tricky with that.
Yes, exactly. And then being involved in some, let's say, some policy making myself, I think that wow, this is really incredible and really complicated task that needs like a million decisions and then thousands of decision makers. And there's one really good initiative from Norway. It's a EV. The subsidy that, let's say, comes as a package for electric vehicles. What was the? It looks like a really simple thing. Like you have a really good idea that's good for environment, but then what could be the possible drawbacks if, let's say, you implement it wrong?
So I could start off by explaining the policy. So it was quite simple that we. At the government level, they took the polluter pay principle, which is a principle that every nation of the UN should assign to, and made it more expensive to drive a polluting car. And then they reduced all taxes on zero-emission cars. So the tax incentive was quite crucial for a family opting to buy a car. Which car should we go for? And then the municipalities, the cities, they coupled this with local benefits, such as if you drive a zero-emission car, you get access to free parking in the city.
So it's very integrated, you mean policy?
Yeah. You get, we will even install charging infrastructure. We will exempt you from paying in a toll ring. So there were a lot of, you could also drive in the bus lane to get from A to B much quicker than standing in the queue with the fossil fuel cars. And this has proven to be enormously effective. In Oslo this year, of all new cars sold so far in 2019, 7 out of 10 cars are completely zero emission, running on battery electric. And if you have that curve and you project it towards 2030, you would actually reach zero emission cars sales in Oslo before 2025. And mobility and emissions from traffic is our main emission source in the city. So it helps a lot in achieving that particular goal. But it doesn't help us with reducing traffic.
But how?
So once we saw that the uptake of electric cars and zero-emission cars, we started introducing charging fees, started introducing a small payment in the toll ring for them to also contribute to the congestion charge, which finances the public transport, as a means of reducing traffic in the city and creating a shift towards public transport and reducing the number of cars on the streets in the city.
But
so
it sounds like a very successful, let's say, initiative. Why is the whole Europe not copying it?
Well, you should ask those representatives from other countries. But if I might speculate a bit, cars have always been expensive in Norway. It was introduced as a luxury good after the Second World War. The finance ministry, once they saw that the population in Norway had increasing purchasing power, they saw that this was a very stable income to finance the welfare state. So they didn't reduce the luxury tax, which was implemented at the beginning. So it has always been expensive and very different from a car-producing nation like Sweden, where the cars are extremely cheap, even though they pollute, compared to Norway. And that was working quite effective by just reducing that tax or eliminating that tax from zero-emission cars. You suddenly find yourself in,
or not making cars.
a very fortunate situation as a consumer. So I think that's part of the success recipe in Norway, and it's the combination of the local and the central government working together in a joint initiative. Yeah. And I think also I could add that there is this climate consciousness amongst the population in the country. So they want to be part of the green transformation in the country.
Real short, and then we'll have some questions from the audience. So if anyone has like a burning question, please do raise your hand, and then I'm gonna come to you. Yeah.
Impressive story, but from this story I have two ideas. First of all, you said that it's a combination between national and municipal government. What we have now, we are, as the managers of cities and urban planners, we are not, municipality has no rights as you have. In Sweden and Norway, municipality has much more rights for the land, for the property, especially for the taxation. And this is really a problem. And today in this room, we have discussion about national plan. state is going to make national policy. So I think maybe they will put policy on urban sprawl, which is killing big cities, because around Vilnius city we have urban sprawl. Young people are buying cheap land, construction houses. It's still this trend is going on, and it depends on the state policies, because municipalities, Vilnius municipality, due to our self-government law, is not responsible, and this is a state role. So I catch this to say that we are in different position.
Okay, we have a question from the audience here.
Hello. So firstly, I would like to thank you for this insightful discussion, and I really commend, Helena, your approach to holistic view of solving all SDGs at once in future cities. And myself, as a personal real estate developer and private investor, we already executed some projects building modern buildings. Now we are focusing on building new type of city within the city. And I'm researching different examples of new infrastructure. And I have very practical question, and I would like to get your opinion. As we see the trend that not only governments and municipalities are dealing with the new type of infrastructure, but also big corporations as Google is taking role in this. So what's your opinion about Sidewalks Lab project, which is taken by Google in the city of Toronto? Is there any good takeaways from that city plan, or there are some obstacles, and what you foresee in this question?
Could you say the
Sidewalks Lab project in city of Toronto, which is managed by company Google.
We have had a big project lately, to look at digitalization and how it affects the rooms in the city, the public rooms, in different ways. And that question too is very, very complex. And of course that we need to guard the citizens' right to the public realm in different ways. That's what you were talking about too, and not making it private and so on. And it's a really big issue about digitalization and how it affects the city in many ways, and we need to look wide on that, I think. Do you have anything from Norway?
Okay, then we have a second question from the audience.
Hi, hello. I have two questions for our guests. Okay, one. I will combine two into one. So, okay, well, basically we in Lithuania or in Baltic states, we have more of territorial planning approach rather than urban planning. Like, it's more based on zoning documents and so on. And then even if we think about normal urban planning and creating like strategies for bigger scale projects, then we fail to implement these kind of things. Even it would not be possible because of private ownership. And then of course there's consolidation mechanisms, maybe transferable land use rights that other countries are doing, but it's not here yet. And that's, well, some solutions for suburbanization, but we're not there yet. Maybe some advices, some examples from your countries.
How do you tackle suburbanization once we're not living in Soviet times anymore? And we
Actually,
have
the
unfortunate private property.
Yeah, the cities in Sweden, they often own a lot of land. So when the city make plans, they can also decide what land to sell to developers and what you should demand from the developer in quality and sustainability and so on. But it's really the planning tool that is the national law of planning and the planning tool, a detailed plan and so on. That is the main tool to work with that. And I asked developers and I asked cities about the same question, because sometimes in cities it's hard, even if the city thinks that, oh, it's good if you build here. Maybe no one wants to build there. Everybody wants to build in the middle of the city. So how do you make people want to build there? And I asked the developers in Sweden, and I said, well, if the city, are very, very strongly points out that we want to to make something out of this area in town, and the city will invest money in parks and streets and so on, and there are a lot of developers that are going to build houses here, and there are a lot of people investing in this area. You can, point out in such an area in an easier way, but the city needs to have that courage again to really point out, we want to have this urbanization or this city planning, the city development right here, and not there. So it's very strongly pointing out. Then they will succeed. And the developer says that that's what they want too, because they want to be assured that the city also will invest and take care of this area afterwards.
Already the organizers are kind of pointing a red card towards me. I mean, it was an amazing discussion, kind of time flies. And unfortunately, we're gonna have to continue the discussion already after this panel is finished. One thing that I'm going to take from this is that the word that I heard a lot is courage, actually having a vision, having guts actually to keep to that vision, that there's no policy that is easy, and there's no policy made without proper cooperation. And you have to care about the citizens. You actually you have to actually not only talk with them, but actually understand them. And it doesn't matter what kind of wild idea you have at the time. If it's sustainable, in 30 years, 2050, it could be a reality. So I would like to thank Dalia Bardauskienė, Morten Nordskag, Helena Pjarnegård, and Algimantas Varpučinskas for participating in these discussions. My name is Martynas Marozas. Loved talking to you, loved having you as an audience, and hope to meet you again sometime in 2050, maybe earlier. Okay, thank you.
And thank you, Martynas. And thank you, Lithuania. Very nice to be here.